Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox, and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email me, tmosso@thewatchbox.com. It's in the description below. It is your purchase and pricing email question line for buying this or any watch you see on any Watchbox platform. Please reach out to me directly. My email address is tmosso@thewatchbox.com. Today, we are discussing a 2016 model year release in 1,300 pieces. This is the Patek Philippe Nautilus Chronograph 40th anniversary, the 5976/1G-001. This is not only the 40th anniversary Nautilus collection, it is the 10th anniversary of the 2006 5980, which was the first Nautilus chrono, and Patek decided to go big. In gray gold, we have this Nautilus chrono, which measures 44 millimeters diagonally, though Patek notes that if we measure side to side, including the wings, the total width of this case is 49.25 millimeters, 3.6 millimeters broader across the wrist than the 5980. You'll also note that the watch is relatively large from lug to lug. Case alone, 49.6 millimeters. End link, a massive 55.3 millimeters. Although it is thin, at 12.6, it's not as thick as something along the lines of a comparably sized Royal Oak offshore. Throw the watch on my wrist, my 16 centimeter circumference wrist, and I'll let you guys determine whether or not this fits. But I would recommend a wrist no smaller than mine. Any smaller and you're gonna have a little bit of encroachment of the lugs beyond the edge of your wrist. I'm just pulling this off. But if your wrist is any smaller than mine, you're going to find that the watch is a bit oversized, and that's sort of the idea. This is by far the boldest Nautilus ever made. Taking a quick look, it is a Nautilus all the same, meaning it has the same artful degree of manual finishing as well as integration of case, bracelet, and lug profiles. The Gerald Genta, the original Nautilus 3700 designer, first penned back in 1976. So the watch has an integrated bracelet that steps down from the taper of the lugs, and you can see that there's a polished bevel that extends from the lug shoulders all the way down the shoulders of the links. The flanks are satinated. The primary links are satinated. The intermediates are polished. You can see this watch has never been apart and refinished. So although it does show marks of careful wear, it has been worn. More importantly, it's never been diminished by the refinisher's wheel, as they say it's only factory once. Patek Philippe uses pins and sleeves on both sides for removable links. So very secure, but you will need a block and punch if you want to size this at home. We have a double deploying clasp. You can see ceramic spring-loaded pin snaps. So over time, as the clamshell locks, it doesn't diminish the pin snap. The tolerances will always remain tight and crisp. And we've got that Calatrava across. You can also see that the clasp itself is curved to match the shape of the underside of your wrist, and there's a nice taper all the way down to the clasp. The case is far more complex than the Aquanaut, and historically, that's often why, despite equivalent mechanical specifications, the Nautilus has always been more expensive than the Aquanaut. Some of that is branding and market positioning, but a lot of it does come down to the complexity of the Nautilus case, which just features more intricate facets of satin contrasting with polish. So we have the case back, we have the mid case, then we have the bezel structure with both its satin and polish, and its winglets. And the winglets are fixed in place by screws, so the whole thing sandwiched together is a hermetically sealed vessel with a screw-down crown, water-resistant to 120 meters. Of course, we have the rounded polygonal bezel that was a signature of Gerald Genta during the 1970s. I always thought the Nautilus was a bit more resolved than the Royal Oak, because the Royal Oak has the rounded octagonal bezel, but then it has a round inner bezel, a round dial, and a round crystal, where here you can see the outer bezel, inner bezel, the crystal, and the dial all are symmetrical in shape. Now, taking a look at that dial, you can see what's more apparent under the lights of my light box than in person, which is the 40th anniversary legend on the dial. If you start moving away, you find that it's far more subtle. There's nothing subtle about the size of this watch, but the signature on the dial is mercifully not one that declares itself from the church towers. It is relatively low-key on a dial that has tons of cool details. Really, it's the diamonds that declare themselves on this dial. So if you're not cool with diamonds, this is not your watch. But I think this is one of the most beautiful and poetic executions of gems on a men's watch of all time. Now, the watch, of course, being white gold, has a little bit of a warmer tone to it than platinum. And a lot of folks ask me, well, is this rhodium-plated white gold that Patek uses, or is it the good stuff? My answer is it's the good stuff. This is what's known as gray gold in the industry. It's white all the way through. It never needs to be rhodium plated. It's not as blazingly white as platinum, but again, it's an honest, natural material. You're looking at the gold, not at a rhodium coat here. There's a little push adjuster on the flank that's used to adjust the date. And then back to those diamonds, you could see they are lush and lovely indices. Now, you do lose a little bit of luminescence because of the presence of those baguette cut gems as the hour indices. You could still see the presence of the hour and minute hand. Now, the watch is a flyback. Take a quick look. There's a mono counter at 6 o'clock. So you have your minutes counter coaxial with your chronograph hour counter, which keeps the dial nice and symmetrical and uncluttered. With a flyback, you can reset and restart the chronograph without first stopping it. And of course, the frame for the date as well as the hands are all white gold, white varnish for the chrono minutes as well as hours. The dial is not the standard blue that you find on a conventional Nautilus. This is a more saturated blue. It's a distinctly metallic blue. I would say it's almost like a metallic cobalt, between cobalt and navy. It's not the silver blue that you see on a lot of Nautilus models. Now we're going to open up the case back where the watch is mechanically identical to the old 5980, and that's no bad thing, as caliber 28520 is a superb timekeeper. It's nicely sized. It doesn't look dwarfed even in this massive case. It is a unidirectional automatic winder with ceramic rotor bearings, a 55-hour power reserve, a 4 hertz beat rate. All this pivots on 35 joules. You can see it's got a free-sprung Gyromax style Patek Philippe balance system. So the Gyromax, devised in the late 40s, implemented in the early 50s, allowing the watch to be very precisely regulated, in this case in 6 positions, one more than a standard chronometer. But it also makes the watch more shock tolerant, as there's no mobile stud index to move if the watch gets concussed. The movement is nicely decorated. It includes a combination of a column wheel of sorts for crisp chronograph operation, and then a vertical clutch. And what that means is with the column wheel, you have a very crisp feeling and sounding chronograph action. And then with the vertical clutch, you'll note there's no extraneous motion. When I start the chronograph, it engages with no play in the system. It will always be smooth, and it will always reset perfectly to the index 12. You can also leave your chronograph running on a full-time basis with a vertical clutch with no additional wear and tear to the movement. Now, because the watch has an anti-magnetic silicone hairspring of Patek's own design, the Patek Philippe Seal Gyromax and 6-position adjustment, it's guaranteed to run no worse than -3 + 2 seconds per day from the factory. It is a very exact timekeeper, and it is a rare opportunity to own a watch that, while it may not seem rare at face value, 1,300 pieces, is so scarce that this is the first example I've handled and reviewed since it came out in 2016, all of which means that collectors tend to hang on to these, and when they do trade hands, it generally happens between collectors or at auction. So this is an unusual and rare opportunity to own the watch direct from the watch box. Otherwise, you may be searching for a while. I know I have. It's taken me, well, 7 years to get this in my hands, and I only recently experienced its counterpart, the Platinum 5711. Both of these 40th anniversary watches are hard to come by. Reach out to Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details.